Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer. Today the topic is criticism. Taking it, giving it, where to look for it, how people have responded to it, and kind of how to, my suggestions, I should say, and then kind of my suggestions on how to take it. Because there is a lot of controversy around criticism or even just book talk in general. Like book talking, not like book T-O-K, but book talk TALK, where you're just talking about the books or doing reviews. And are there crossover points, or are there points where it is a conflict of interest because you are also a creator, especially creator versus creator criticism? So I wanted to bring this topic up just to talk about it, just to talk about some of the things that I've seen recently, and also to point out a little bit of disappointment that I've had recently. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on this channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through Lemoy, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and the first Monday video of the month, we go through some of those prompts, basking in the creativity that is you guys. There are a couple more days. Well, there's technically tomorrow is when I'm going to shoot it. So you have like tomorrow to get in on February's Lemoy, and then the next Lemoy goes up for March. So there's that. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out. If you submit the first chapter and the cover to the feature, they'll be read here on the channel to hopefully help more readers find your work. I know if I see stuff in the stack, I grab it to put on my reading list as well. It just depends on when I get to it because of how vast my reading list is. And then the third thing is if you would like to check out any of my books, even get back at me in retribution, you can get them at any of your favorite places to get books, including the local library and OneDrive. That's what we got going on here. So before I get into this topic, obviously there's going to be this is all opinion. This is all just my feelings, because that's all that this is. It's a discussion. I like to bring up discussion pieces and just share what I see, share what I've thought, share kind of how I view things, and then and then invite people into the conversation because they can change my mind. Like I see this conversation about creators and criticisms and how to do criticisms and the different relationships between types of criticism, because you've got reader or consumer criticism, you've got creator on creator criticisms, you've got creator on professional creator criticism, so like book reviewers or people that specifically do that thing as their thing, or opiners, as you might think. And then you have the good faith or the bad faith ideas, where it's like somebody hates you and so they're going to rip your book apart or your story apart because they hate you. And how legitimate is that? So there are so many angles in which to go on about this. And there are also so many emotions, so many feelings that are involved in all of this. And the first thing that I wanted to bring up is, what is a criticism versus a customer response? So they can look sort of the same. And again, these are all my opinions. This is kind of just how I separate things out. And for the purpose of like on this channel, I obviously do book reviews. I obviously walk through books or talk about books. And all that I can say is I give you the experiences that I had or the thoughts that I had. I never think that my opinion or my version of anything is correct. All I can do here is say, this is what I've been reading. This is the experience that I had. This is how I read it, be it correct or incorrect. And let's talk about it, which is none of my book reviews here are meant to convince somebody to read or not read something. They're just to have a conversation about the books with people who have either read them or people who are interested in talking about the books or knowing about the books. So that's all that I do here on the channel. And because I'm also a writer, you know, you're going to have the questions of, isn't it kind of illegitimate or not good to be critiquing other people? And technically, in a professional setting, a lot of people discourage criticizing your peers that are in your same field. So like it would be less weird to criticize video games since I'm not making video games, or it would be considered less unprofessional to criticize video games since I'm not a video game writer. This is often why you don't see other big creators critiquing other creators, like authors creating other authors, because you're not technically supposed to do it because it can ruin your relationships with those other people if they take it as an attack. You can often see this in the indie circle with a lot of indie authors saying that they will not leave book reviews, or they do not do book reviews or star ratings unless they're 4 or 5 stars, because they want to have that, one, they want the reciprocity of being returned good things. 2, they don't want to be assumed to like be review bombing, which funny enough, the people that do review bomb often get away with it. And then 3, they don't want to shut that door on a professional relationship. It gets even more sketchy if you have a working relationship with that person and then you're asked to do a review on those things. Recently, this happened with Ethan Van Sciver and Chuck Dixon as he went over the Alpha Core comic book, at least. So this is from an observer's point of view. But I did want to bring this up, where you got Ethan Van Sciver saying, I didn't say any of that. Joe's artwork is mostly good, but his faces are almost always a distraction. On top of that, his 5 inkers tend to exaggerate his flaws, and the 2 colorists utterly annihilated everything with their overuse of bright blues and oranges, which he did say in his review. Chuck wrote a coherent plot, but also wrote the characters as despicable, whiny failures who hate each other and who blithely allow the villains to overreact to being criminally investigated, which causes a 9/11 level event from which there's nothing Alpha Core can do but hurt their getaway airplane. Okay, I would like to know what the coherent plot is, because if you look on this channel, I walked through the plot with Montana, and as far as I can tell you, there are a bunch of characters that randomly come in. You've got Michael and Lillian who are trying to take down Alpha Core for this whole time, and you don't really even have an introduction to Michael and Lillian and what their relationship is long-standing with Alpha Core, who Alpha Core are. And then you got the 3 main members of Alpha Core, Brian, Valdez, and Ricky, the 3rd guy that doesn't really matter because he kind of just flies in to like save some random people and flies out. And Michael of the baddies just keeps hiring like random people to go in and mess stuff up and get Alpha Core's attention. But they don't really have a plot line. Like at the very beginning, it's theoretically, it's implied that Michael had the bomber guy going in there to do something, and that was at the bank. And all this time, they could have just had the guy with the silver tongue go in and get right in there and place the thing in there and then do something to make Alpha Core pay attention to it and go in to get the thing. But instead, you end up with person after person after person dying because everybody is an idiot and all these other people randomly involved, like the knockoff, the Fantastic Four knockoff. And you've got the scene going back and forth between the old guy and the electric guy that are over there with Valdez and then the bank, and they don't actually connect. And so it's a lot of vague things that didn't actually get pulled together. They're just happening simultaneously and switching every other page. And there is nothing actually accomplished. Now, it looked like they were trying to take Alpha Core down, but there was no actual conflict or relationship that was started in that story. So it looked to me like something that wasn't fully developed. The plot wasn't coherent because you couldn't follow the character motives. There are a couple of reasons why the plot may not have been discussed. And one can be professionalism, where you don't want to have issues with other professional ties that you're going to have in other cases. Another thing is you may not actually be able to do a literary analysis of somebody else's work because it is hard. Now, I don't know. And then the other thing is you just might not freaking care, because Ethan himself in his own videos said he did not want to do this. He did not like doing reviews. And as somebody who had to awaken this skill again, I don't necessarily think it is easy to just be able to analyze a plot or what is happening in the story. It's something that you actively have to do with, okay, why is this happening? What is happening? What is it leading to? And then how does that play out? But I specifically, I was annoyed with the lack of detail in discussing the plot of Alpha Core and the characters of Alpha Core. Yeah, they all suck. They don't have a relationship because you don't spend enough time with any of them. They're not developed. So you get that. But what I was really, really, really disappointed in was when Ethan was talking about Shadow of the Conqueror with John Malin. And I'm going to give you a brief moment of that. You're going to have to go watch the thing yourself if you're going to see it. But just watch this really quick.
This is the Liberace of swords. Yes or no?
Yeah. Yeah, it's flamboyant.
This looks like it was designed by Napoleon Dynamite. You know what I mean? Like in his notebook. That's the other thing it looks like to me. Like Napoleon Dynamite would be like, I designed this wicked blade.
Yeah. I like that they put it on 2 opposing pages. Like, hey, this sword and also this sword.
And then another, yeah, it's like here, and it's the same sword. It's not any different. I mean,
yeah.
as I was saying, like Shad, I don't watch his channel at all, but he seems to fetishize swords, blades. He thinks they are awesome. They're really awesome, and they are. A sword is nice, but like he imagines this hilt here, which is fucking like this hilt. It looks like something Nancy Kerrigan would wear around her roller skate or
yeah,
her ice skate.
It's like a tiara on the handle.
A tiara, yeah, like it's Miss America's sword, everyone. It is gay. All right.
Okay. It is gay is not a critique. It is a consumer preference. And that specifically, it is gay, this is gay, is something that's going to come out throughout this entire review. So this is not a professional criticism as far as I'm concerned, because it doesn't give you anything actionable. It doesn't tell you why something works or why something doesn't work with the distinct choices. All it says is, I don't like this, and because I don't like this, it's gay. And that's used as an insult. Something else that stood out to me specifically, and I'm not even a sword person, is that this sword, this hilt, you're going to insult this hilt, it's just a rapier hilt. All he did was take a normal rapier and then change the colors of it, design it a little bit. But that is literally just a rapier. And instead of just being like, you know what, if I was doing a sword thing, I would have picked, you know, a broadsword or some other kind of sword. You're going to go and just be like, this is gay because I wouldn't choose this. This is going to be the dive in for me on the difference between a criticism, like a professional criticism versus a customer response criticism. So a customer response criticism, and we also need to go about this just in case, because Fantasy Files podcast and I were talking about this a couple months ago or a couple weeks ago, I don't remember. And they also posted this video just the other day, which I thought was funny. So you've got
books lower than a 3, you are the asshole. Let me tell you why. I have been writing this book, my book, for like, I don't know, 3-4 months now. I'm like hundreds of thousands of words in, 120,000. It is so motherfucking hard. And if someone has not only written, but also edited and published a book, minimum 3 stars. I don't care how much you hate it, give it 3 stars, because those authors deserve it. It is hard motherfucking work.
Okay. Authors. We have this conversation all the time, as you can see, even with just this heading here. Book reviews are not for the author. Book reviews are not technically going to help the author. And so if you don't want to see criticisms of your book, then do not go and look at book reviews, because book reviews are going to be readers talking to other readers about the experiences that they had. And sometimes it's just going to be, I hated this book. Sometimes it's going to be, I haven't even read this book. I just dislike the idea of this book. And that happens all the time. But also, you're spending 3 to 4 months on that and think you deserve a 3-star. Girl, come back to me when you've spent like 12 years. If this is what we're going to do for a time spent equals you deserve a minimum. Because for me, 3 to 4 months is not even amount of time to work on. Anyway, so because this conversation comes up so much about what freaking are book reviews, what are reviews anyway compared to criticisms, and where can you glean information for getting better. Some authors, especially indie authors, do not have the resources or the community that they need in order to get the feedback that they're looking for. So they do use book reviews as a way to kind of test what it is they're doing that's working or not working. Now that is a personal choice to do. A couple of months ago as well, I have a video on it here, there was an author that saw a book review on a blog going around Twitter, and so he decided that he didn't want to see that book review going around because it just called him a sexist. It literally just kept calling him a sexist. And so he blocked the person so he didn't have to see the book review coming up as pushed by that person in that community. So then there was this whole big thing about how that author can't take criticism because he blocked someone so he didn't have to see the review. So now we've got people forcing reviews on some people, as well as saying book reviews are for the readers, not for the authors. So then we're getting mixed signals. So this goes into where I said, if authors want to use book reviews to kind of glean how their book is being read by other people, and if they're missing the mark or hitting the mark, that is up to them. But a book review is not necessarily going to be helpful in telling you what you're trying to do or helping you better your craft, because a book review is a customer response as opposed to a professional criticism, which is more likely to tell you things that worked and things that didn't work, and actionable ideas or developmental ideas. And that's not even to say that book reviews will not have that. It's just, for the most part, book reviewers and book reviews are customer based things, to communicate from one purchaser to another, not to communicate to the author. So the difference that I see here, and why I brought up Ethan's thing with just saying this is gay, is that's a customer response. You don't have to like every book that you get. You don't have to like any of the books that you get. You can hate any little thing in any book for any reason and just say, you know what, I didn't like how this girl said this line. It got on my nerves, and just, I hated this character the entire time. Every book review that I do on this channel, even though some of them or most of them I try to give, this is why it didn't work for me and here are different ways that it could have worked, it is still just my response, and this is why it didn't work for me. And that thing is not necessarily going to bother other people, but it does bother me. It's the same thing when I talk about any books that have like protagonists in them that end up in a cheating relationship. Because of my own background with how my family fell apart and my dad cheated on my mom and then abandoned the family, I can't get behind protagonists who are cheaters, who willfully cheat on their partners, because it's not something that you can win me over with. It is one of the most selfish things that you can do that is non-criminal for me. And so you're just gonna have a really hard time. And I can say that in my review, and I can say I didn't like this character because he made this choice and he couldn't win me back. But that doesn't mean that the author has to take that into consideration of anything. That is specifically a reader response. That is specifically a this was my experience response. And so the same thing can be said of in that comic book review where you say, oh, I don't like how this is done, this is gay. I don't like how this is drawn, this is gay. Okay, but that is not a criticism. And the reason that the whole criticism line keeps coming up is because the whole point of reading that book theoretically was that he was being paid to do a professional criticism that would help. And instead, for me at least, it looked like mockery, it looked like bullying, because somebody did something differently than you would. There was, oh, I don't like how this kid looks so cute and so cartoony. I don't like how this isn't as brutal as I would draw it. And that's fine. That's a customer review. But that's not actionable for the vibe of somebody else. There was a part in there where I was talking about it feeling super nerdy or super niche. And look, I'm not even a fan of Shad, but I feel like the personality of the book actually, and the art style of the book actually matches what Shad is going for, because there are different art styles that work for different things, and it's going to be a reader preference. I know for a fact that some of the art that I like is going to be stuff that other people do not like, and vice versa. So it's just kind of accepting something as a professional crit, or somebody that's trying to do more of a craft criticism instead of a customer review. You're going to take the work generally, how it is, try to see what the author creator is doing and the styles in which they're doing it, and then help them in the direction that they're going to bring out what it is they're doing. There are a couple of people, a bunch of accounts on YouTube that have made giant videos just ripping the crap out of some of Jenna Moressi's books. And in case you're from the comic side of things, or you've never heard about this before, Jenna Moresi was a very, very big author and YouTuber who talked about writing some years ago, and now I think she mostly does live streams. And she released some books, and people were not happy with the quality of her books, and so then whole careers were made out of ripping Jenna Moresi apart and her books apart for not following her own advice and for saying all of your books suck, and then pointing out how they could be better, and even to the point of doing line-by-line edits that completely remove the voice of the author. Personally, that's not the way that I would edit something. That's not the way that I would suggest to edit something, because I find it really disrespectful to try to remove the voice of the author and replace it with your own because you just don't like the style of that person. But that's what I consider a difference between a criticism and a customer review. A customer review is entirely going to be towards specifically speaking to other customers, potential buyers, people who have already bought the book, who are looking for that therapy or looking for other people to say that they love Rysand, or, whatever it is. They want to talk about the characters. They want to talk about the story to other people who enjoy it, who are not the author. But a criticism is going to be talking about the mechanics of the story, the choices of the story. And you can say, I prefer not this art style. but that is less of a professional criticism and more of a personal preference. A couple of things when it comes to crit. Number one, don't automatically trust anything that comes from somebody that is in even a professional environment. You have to use discernment in the critique that you receive. I've experienced and have friends who have experienced like grad school where they critiqued somebody else's work in their circle, and then the next day when their piece was critiqued, it was maliciously critiqued, not actually helpful critique. And you can still find helpful feedback in malicious people sometimes, but also sometimes you don't. Then you got stuff where it's like if you're on Scribophile and you do some random person's story, they might come to your page to try to get back at you. There are even people that'll reach out and say, hey, can you critique my work? And then you critique it, and then they're like, well, aren't you gonna give me your work? And then they just rip it to shreds because they either that's how they do it or they are maliciously going after you. So even in the professional setting or a setting where you would expect to get legitimate feedback, just prepare yourself, steel yourself for what could possibly happen. I also had this happen with an editor who actually ran a contest saying, you know, submit your prompts or submit your blurbs, and then there'll be a contest and I'll pick the contest and give them a free editing. And I eventually won that. And then for months and months and months, she missed the deadline of actually looking over my work until, you know, I feedbacked her, and then she just gave me like a half a page thing with no actionable anything. So I don't know what her editing services were. That was specifically to advertise her editing services, and as far as I'm concerned, like, I wouldn't use her editing services based on that, but if that was just her doing what she had to do because I won the contest and not wanting to say, hey, I don't think that this is ready for this yet, blah, or I don't want to waste my time on this, or I don't think that we are good partners for this. She put in zero effort, did half a page, and then obviously I would never hire her based off of that. So there is that. Be careful that even when you hire somebody, your editor may not either be legitimate or may not know what they are doing, and they may not mesh with you, which is something that is very, very important, is having somebody who understands what you are going for, even if it's not their thing. That's another thing that I experienced in grad school is I had somebody in my crit group, in before she finds this video and then comes at me again. I had somebody in my crit group who wrote something that I perceived as very, very political. Later, she said it was not political, but like, it had a lot of modern politics in it. A lot of modern politics. Like, we're talking about make Earth great again levels of obvious politic. And so she wrote this stuff, and I just critiqued the story about putting characters in a certain way, or doing character interactions or story interactions or motivations or, you know, actual world stuff. And then some years later, she discovered that I didn't like her story, and she asked me why I didn't tell her that I didn't like her story, and got mad at me for not saying that I didn't like her story. And I'm like, because this is a critique group, it's not my job to say whether I like it or not. It's not my job to purchase it or not. It's my job to try to see it for what it is and then critique it in that direction, not change your identity in your story. But that's just the way that I critique. Not everybody critiques that way. And then some people get mad at you for not critiquing that way. Personally, I don't want somebody to try to overwrite my voice, but maybe other people do. I also personally, when it comes to critique, when people have asked me to do it, I don't like to take books for free. I like to purchase the books if somebody comes to me and asks me to read their book, because I don't want them to have expectations that I will give them a certain type of thing because they have given me a book. The other thing, and I have had this also happen, where people in friends groups have been like, hey, can you give me feedback on this? And I've given them feedback. And then they have either gone passive aggressive or full on aggressive when they knew that it wasn't going to be fully positive, or when they saw some of it that had some critical comments in it. And then it became a very long game of passive aggression. That was not cool. And this has led me to be to the point, and then with both of those people I did this, because I've had enough bad interactions with giving crit, where I go, what kind of crit are you looking for? Tell me what it is you're looking for. Are you looking for vibe? Are you looking for reader feedback? Are you looking for anything? Like, what is it that you want in critique? And every single time, without fail, they go, oh, any kind of feedback is good. So then I give the feedback. In one case, I didn't even get the feedback. It was the idea of having critical feedback. And they don't take it. So giving feedback, receiving feedback is a sketchy game either way. Just try to do the best that you can and try to know your partner. And this is why I've attempted to become a little more careful when it comes to accepting one-on-one feedback because of this sort of thing. So when it comes to delivering or choosing to do reviews or criticisms, especially publicly, like in this forum, there are many different reasons why it can be done. One of it is for clout. I have seen more than enough people accusing other people of doing reviews for clout, only doing things to be popular, only doing hate reviews or things that are popular to hate on in order to get them clicks based on the hatred. Thinking of the Fourth Wing, thinking of the Light Lark especially. You know, I know slightly what's more popular in the book sphere, but not really because I don't follow the book sphere. I kind of just read whatever I want to read. But there is that. There's also where you just happen to be reading something popular and or that was popular because you wanted to and then you wanted to talk about it, and then people will still accuse you of clout chasing just because you're doing whatever. Then there is doing it for the art form, where you want to talk about the story, the mechanics, because you enjoy it. And you enjoy the process of putting stories together or taking them apart. I have so much fun talking about stories and characters and opportunities. Freaking even that last night, when I was waiting for one of my videos to finish exporting, I was talking to Montana about the Shadow of the Conqueror comic book, and we were coming up with all sorts of different ideas for how it could have been taken and what could have been done, and just giving Dalen an actual chance to redeem himself. Or if there was some girl whose parents he killed when it was his reign, and then he met this girl when he was now his current, you know, back in time age, and this girl was a friend or an adoptee of Eric, because Eric is the Lightbringer and she needed somebody to take care of her after her parents died. And this is Dalen's introduction to kindness, to warmth, and also to the fallout of his reign, because this girl and her entire communities were destroyed by his things. But there were other community by his policies. But there were other communities that thrived on these policies. And so, like, at some point he could have had this conversation with this young girl that is so kind, and been like, well, how can you dislike Daelis the Conqueror? Like, excuse me if I'm overstepping here, but, you know, he educated you. He kept child slavery gone. He built roads. He did all of this and this and this that were so good. And she goes, no, that's just propaganda. They did that in this big city and this big city, but my town was raised. My town was paid nothing in order to build these things. My parents died. Daelis the Conqueror would end entire families based on a lie because he wouldn't believe anyone. He was so paranoid. And it could have been such a thing that he saw the drastic difference between how he was living and how other people, the people that he didn't pay attention to, lived. And then you could have had this foil to her, which would have been somebody who was a Daelis devotee, as you see in the novel, where he later finds a cult that still very much believe in the reign of Dalen. And you could have had her against the girl that was not the fan of Dalen. And just seeing which choices Dalen made brought him closer to one or the other. And then eventually, you know, Eric would be like, you need to tell her who you are. You cannot keep living a lie. And this eventually resulted into talking about, like, well, then he does tell her who he is, and she's heartbroken, and she doesn't want anything to do with him because she is so heartbroken. And Eric tells him, you know, the sins of, you can't always run from the sins of your past. You have to fess up to them. You have to face them. And sometimes because of the things that you did, you cannot have the future that you wished for, because you closed the doors on those with the actions you took. And then there were consequences to those actions. And he can talk about, you know, you may not be able to have that relationship with other people that you kind of want, but you can still live repenting for the things that you have done to the best of your abilities until the day that you die. And having Dalen not be able to get everything that he wanted and have to live with these consequences, that sometimes you take action that hurts you in the long run, that stops you from getting anywhere that you wanted to be because you were selfish, because you were impulsive, because you were evil. Like, that is such a thing. There are so many ways that this book could have gone. Anyway, I'm getting off track here. That's just me saying I love talking about stories. And even when I'm reading a story that I do not like, if we get into it, I could even talk about Forbidden and different ways that could have been done, because Kit was screwed over in that book, and there were so many ways that Kit could have been served, and the plot could have been stronger, and the character relationships could have been stronger. And the thing that I hate the most is reading something and seeing the potential and how the potential was not grabbed. But so you can do this just because you love the art form and you love talking about it, and that's the reason why I mostly do it. Then you've got doing it casually just because, you know, hey, I'm reading this thing, so I want to share and see if anybody else is doing this thing. But then you have, when it comes to humiliating people, to build a platform where you just want to say that thing sucks, that guy sucks, that's gay, because you're making fun of somebody for doing things differently than you, and not for any legitimate reason. You're just the mean guys club. You're the mean girls club. You are just little catty people that are dragging people down. And it doesn't matter. See, this is one of the things that bothers me, because I'm sitting here talking about stories, and nobody has to believe me. I can be the worst person ever in the universe. That's fine. But I'm sitting here just talking about books that I'm reading, just talking about stories. And I get the bleed over from some of these communities that assume my politics, that assume all sorts of things about me and my reason behind the way that I review when I've got 100+ reviews on the channel. But yeah, right, this one, just this one that is for your guy is done politically, because everybody that surrounds you does reviews based on whether or not they like the person. That's very annoying, but it is what it is. I think that when it comes to doing analysis of stories or why things work or don't work, it is a skill that you have to acquire by doing it. One of the things that I did in grad school for creative writing, it was one of the requirements every semester. We built reading lists with our mentors, and then throughout the semester, we would read those books and then identify something in the text that we either liked or didn't like, put it into words why it worked or didn't work. So we're deconstructing what it is we're seeing in the story. Like a character description, write it down and then describe what it is that makes it work. Like a string of dialogue, write it down and then go through it as to why it works for you or why it doesn't. And this is the recommendation that I give everybody to get better at writing, is slow down enough to go through what it is you're reading and why it works or why it doesn't work, because that is going to make the difference in understanding how a story is put together and what your preferences are in reading or otherwise. Because if you're not doing that, then you're just going to take everything as it is exactly, and you're just going to be consuming the content instead of seeing why it works and then putting into words why it works that way. That is a skill. There's also this tendency when it comes to description or criticism or analysis to pretend or act like or even assume that a depiction or a criticism is the only right way. I've even seen the same thing in giving recommendations or writing tips, and I know that I try not to do that or try to make it seem like I'm doing that. I try to make it very, very clear when I'm giving suggestions that this is what works for me, this is how I do it, but you're gonna have to try out different things to see what works for you, because everybody works differently. I swear, the majority of people I talk to do not write the same way that I do, because they edit as they go instead of just writing the whole thing and then doing a complete rewrite and then doing a complete rewrite and then doing a full edit and then a full edit and a full edit until it doesn't need to anymore. Like, I spend a lot of time and I don't edit in place. But I know a lot of people that do edit in place. You get into the same conversation with pantsers versus plotters, where sometimes it sounds like one is being said to be better or more legitimate than the other, or sprinting versus not sprinting. And I use sprints in a lot of situations, especially in first drafts, in order to get through the first drafts. There is no singular answer, and personally, I think you can make anything work if done the correct way. But you've got to see it in context in order to tell if it's going to work or not, or to tell if it's working or not. Another thing that comes up often in book reviews or criticisms is that using those criticisms of a book to attack the author. And this especially comes up in book reviews in the book sphere-ish, where people will go, oh, this is written this way, and so then that means that the author is this thing. And while you can never get away from your experiences and your beliefs being put in the story, I think that there is a line crossed when you're using somebody's creative fiction in order to attack them. Yeah, sometimes you get complete, basically autobiographical fiction. That's what I've heard about Onision. I don't know. But sometimes you get complete autobiographical fiction. But we have ended up in this situation where it's happened multiple times now, where people will use the book as a proxy to attack the author personally, to slander the author, then say it's a book review, so you're not allowed to respond to it. So they kind of hide accusations within book reviews to stop anybody who is like the author from responding to the slander. And that's just kind of icky to me. What kind of goes in line with that is also this idea that if you're criticizing a book or a movie or a game, then you're obviously criticizing the creator. You obviously hate the creator, which is the only reason why you would ever possibly criticize something or praise something. But I hope that anybody who assumes that you could only criticize something if you didn't like the person knows that it just invalidates or makes your opinion look really sketchy on anything that you like. Because it says if you dislike something, then you dislike the person. So if you like something, then you must like the person, right? I don't like to get into that game. I think that I can like or dislike a story without liking or disliking the person. I think that the person can make me want to read their story if I like them. And I think that they can also make me not want to read their story if I determine that I just don't like them as a person. But that's more of a me wanting to see what they can do as opposed to I think that it's good because I like you, or I think that it's bad because I dislike you. Another consequence that may come from giving public book reviews of any sort is that people are going to weigh what you say in those book reviews, one against everything. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've critiqued a book, a specific element in a book, and why it doesn't work in that book. And then people try to broaden it to every example, or they go, well, it worked here, or, well, people are like that. Okay. But I'm talking about specifically in this instance, how it is presented here, is that what it is trying to do? So they can end up trying to put your words to literally everything and then look for, so they can end up trying to put your words to literally everything and then call you a hypocrite when that's not what you did. People could also try to invalidate everything that you say based on your feedback. So then it becomes a bad thing to actually give any sort of feedback or any sort of public review. Not even feedback, just a reader response. Because people will be like, oh, you said that thing? Well, that makes you illegitimate. You're dumb because you didn't read this the correct way. That becomes part of the risk of actually doing public book reviews or discussions or craft talks. And a lot of people seem to constantly be looking for a way to tear other people down just on their opinions or just on their preferences. It's sad. Now, taking criticism is hard. There comes a time in every public person's life where you're gonna get hit with criticism. I think about this every time I send a book into NetGalley and I'm like, I am paying for my own pain. Here are my cheeks. We're gonna get ready to rumble. And without a doubt, I get 1-star reviews sent to my inbox. I get criticisms sent straight to me. It happens. But not all criticism is going to be helpful. And this is something that I get into it with people over all the time. And there's no right or wrong. You know, you got to do what is going to work for you. But I don't want people to think that you have to take all criticism or that all criticism is valid. My suggestion when it comes to criticism is think about what it is you're trying to do with your story. Think about your characters. Think about your expressions. Think about your relationships. Think about your plot. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? Now, when you get criticisms back, are the criticisms one lining up with what you're trying to do, or are they basically telling you they want a different story? Because some criticisms will come in and be like, okay, but actually I would prefer, I know that your story is about this farmer girl that's going into a cave and then she finds this rock and then this rock has magical abilities and then she becomes a princess. But what I would actually prefer is if the story was not about her, but about her dog who actually stole a shoe and landed into an isekai world where he became a giraffe. I mean, fine, but that is a completely different story than the one. And so giving that as a criticism is not necessarily helpful because it's not going to do anything. I remember being in a critiquing class in undergraduate school, and I had a short story that was about this guy who came over to his girlfriend's house. So he was dating a single mom, and this was the first time that he was going to meet her 8-year-old son. And the 8-year-old son obviously hated this guy because he's like, who is this man moving in here? You're not my dad. You're not going to try to friggin' be my dad. And so then it was just this relationship between this guy trying to connect with his girlfriend's 8-year-old son. And there was somebody in that class, you know, we're supposed to be giving feedback. It's a college university class on freaking giving criticism. And all that he wrote on the copy that he turned in was, "I hate this. Why would you write this?" I don't want to say that this guy was a stereotype of like a black hoodie with the emo sweep, but this guy was a bit of a stereotype. But not all criticism is going to be helpful. Some criticism is going to mislead you. Some criticism is going to be flavored with the preferences of that person. And so that's why it's important, at least from my perspective, to find people that, one, understand you or want to understand you, and then help you build that. And I think there are different phases for different types of criticism, because I think you're going to have your crit partner who is going to more carefully try to help you capture your voice and make your fiction better and solidify that craft. And then you're going to have your beta readers and your alpha readers who are not necessarily going to help you as much as your critique partner, but your beta readers and alpha readers will tell you how things are working, so you can more or less do a temperature check on if you think that you are successful in a broader group of people. But that is, again, how I view these different types of criticisms. So I think it's very important that when you're doing criticism and doing crafting, that you find somebody who sort of understands you to try to guide you in the way that you want to go. One of the difficulties I went through with Dead End Drive was being in college and it not being a very college-safe book, if you know what I mean. It has nothing to do with smut and everything to do with the politically incorrect jokes. And some of the logic behind it. But that book went through such difficulty because I was a young writer. I was trying to discover how to weave together these 12 characters, because it is a big cast to begin with, and the cast gets smaller as it goes. The humor, there was nobody at that college really that did humor. There was like one person, and he was only there every other semester, and I never got to work with him. And I don't think any of my professors believed in my work. In fact, one of them said, "How's it feel to be writing a book that'll never be published?" That was the first thing that he ever said to me. And through going through that process, there were some good things, because it helped me realize that I was trading my character voices for humor and jokes. So it was turning it into a sitcom and getting rid of the strong character voices in order to make jokes. But I also ended up overcorrecting in ways to the point that I ripped out the authorial voice in all of it. And I didn't actually find a way to put an author's voice in there until after I finished college, and then continued to work on it for the next 2, 3, 4 years after I graduated. I worked on it on and off between other projects where I learned how to write more, and eventually came back and put more of the voice back in there into the third person narrative. But for a while, it was completely gutted of character voice over in the narration, and it was hard for me to look at because of that. It actually made me a little bit bitter for a little while, because I felt like my mentors had misled me, and then I had to figure out how to put that back in there and how to do that after getting out of college. Some other pitfalls that you can run into in running into criticism is people trying to tear you down through that criticism, making it personal, or bullying people through, "I'm going to just take this and mock it," instead of trying to help you. You've also got the issue, like I mentioned earlier, with "this is how you do it," rather than "this is a preference of mine and this is how I do it," because a lot of people will use their preferences as if they are right when they are not. And I also see this a lot in the artist community, where you'll see people say, "Well, this is how I draw, and so everything else and every other way to draw is useless, is stupid, is gay." Look, you don't have to like other people's art, but venue and expectation matters. That's all that I can say. At the end of the day, when it comes to taking criticism, hearing criticism, experiencing criticism, you're never going to be able to make everybody happy. I lean on the safest side that I can, which is I like my characters. I am totally happy rereading my stories. I love spending time with my characters so much that I'm learning how to draw so I can spend more time with them. And so I'm so excited to share them with other people because I love my characters so much. But I don't expect anybody to like them as much as I like them. And I don't expect anybody to enjoy what I'm doing. I hope that you enjoy what I do. But I accept that you might not. And I think that's one of the safest ways to go into anything, is that you can only present your thing and you will never make everybody happy, which is fine. Just review what it is you are trying to do and how well you did, and take it in strides. Just breathe. I'm all over the place with this. I have so many different areas in this. Like, you have stuff like swearing people off for not giving you good reviews, for not saying how awesome your story is. You have this chick over here, you know, saying if they finished it, freaking give them a 3-star. Woman, you don't know how I have suffered. I am not giving the story that is sold to teenagers where it's a brother and a sister having a sexual romantic relationship and acting like it's a civil rights issue, and you look at the comments and they're like, this changed my view on incest. I am not giving that hot mess a minimum 3-star average. What that tells me is that, girl, do you even read outside of whatever it is that you enjoy consuming? Because I have suffered. I am not giving Lawn Boy a 3-star. I am not giving Slay a 3-star. That woman spent 11 days writing that book. Get out of here. I am not giving Leather and Lace 3 stars minimum because it's 600 pages. It should have been 250 pages, and then maybe I would have given it a 2-star because the suffering would have been a lot less, that's for sure. Anyway, point being, in summary, you don't automatically get good reviews, but everybody that is critical of your story is not just being hateful, but also there are people that just want to be hateful or just think it's my way or the highway and it's the only way and we're going to bully you for being any different. And personally, I might not like everything. I know that I have places where my preferences are like, this is a hard line, this is what my preference is. Other people are going to like this thing. I'm not going to like this thing. One of my dislikes is sexual humor. I'm really not a fan of that. I'm really not a fan of explicit sex and things. That doesn't mean that you can't have a sex scene, but explicit sex and sex scenes are completely different. I'm not a fan of when sex is forced on characters in stories, and a lot of the time there is so much sex abuse that is forced on male and female characters, and it's made as light, it's made as not a problem. I can't stand it. Sometimes it's made romantic, and I don't like it. But that doesn't mean that other people won't. It just means that I am not going to be the person that you want to send your content to if it contains these sort of elements and you want a positive review. I also don't really like it when somebody tries to hide eroticism or fetishes from me when they talk about their stories and sell me their stories, and it's not a Western dystopian. It's a thirst trap. It's not a sci-fi. It's not a YA. It's erotic. I don't like that. But those are all personal preferences. Anyway, so those are the differences between creator criticism and consumer criticism, and somewhat how to take it. Just deep breaths. It's hard for everybody. I know every time that something comes in for me, I'm like, well, I am a failure. I'm an absolute failure. What am I doing? And then I remind myself, writing is a compulsion. These characters are a compulsion. I've had a character like poking at the corner of my brain telling me, hey, it's time to create a new character for like a week and a half, 2 weeks, and I can't exactly hear them, so I don't know entirely who they are or what they look like, but I got that character impulse, and that just happens, and eventually they just come out. So even if I wasn't making my stuff public, I would still be doing it. So guess what? Instead of the doom and gloom of I'm a failure and I can't do this, I'm just saying, this is what I'm working on. I want to do the characters justice. I want to do the characters respect. I want to do the readers respect, and I want to share the world that I see. And then that's just what it comes down to. So believe in your stuff, love your stuff, and your passion will come through your characters and your story more than anything else. Regardless of how you felt about Lightlark and Nightbane, you could feel that the author loved those stories. At least I could. Anyway, that's my talk on this. Just, I don't know where I wanted to go with this. There's just been so much conversation and so much hatred around this entire topic. And I think for the most part, I was just so disappointed in a review of a story, not even being about the story, not even being about the actual art. It's just, this is gay. I'm pieced out, and I was hoping for some critical analysis of things, but can't win them all, I guess. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on that with like the culture around criticism. I think that's the main reason why I wanted to do this video, is to just talk about the culture around criticism, expectations of criticism, and book reviews, because book reviews are weaponized both by other creators and by people who don't create. And in some cases, you got people with giant book platforms who target smaller people and say, well, I'm justified in attacking that person because they're an author, so technically I'm the oppressed one, even if I have 100,000 subscribers. There's just so much weaponization going around, my guy. I just... where we are. So I wanted to talk about it. Let me know what your thoughts are on this whole subject of creators and criticism and review culture and creator criticism culture. How do you deal with criticism? If you get it, where do you look for criticism? All of that, whatever your thoughts and more, down in the comments below. With that said, thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out? The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross. Is he in trouble? We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him. Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Way. Why? Did you do that? To the left. Plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?